Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Why Do I? My deep sea exploration into some pretty fascinating subject matter with some people who really seem to know what they're talking about. So I was having this friendly debate with my producer, Karan Ravishankar, Shanks as we know him, and we were discussing a hot topic in today's day and age. The point I was trying to make to him is that I don't really care if the government has access to all my data as long as I know that it's in some way helping to keep us safe. I mean, who cares if some creepy dude in some dark room can see my embarrassing photos or drunken texts as long as even one terrorist plot can be foiled? His only response was to give me a withering look as he just uttered the line, "You stupid, naive dumbass." The 15 minutes of not getting anywhere later, he suggested that we bring in our next guest for this episode, a man who is the ultimate authority on the subject. A subject that I'm sure everyone has an opinion on because after all, it's your own privacy we're talking about. For this episode, Shanks will also join our conversation, which will hopefully turn into a lively debate and informed discussion about the perils of government surveillance and will in no doubt leave both of us being properly and truly schooled. Shanks, since you and Kazim go way back, why is he here on this podcast?
Hi, Jhala. A bit nervous being on the microphone this time rather than behind. But yeah, I wasn't just shocked with our discussion. I think if the government did get a hold of your messages, they would just stop surveilling the country. So those drunken texts. Anyway, so Kazim Rizvi, someone I met at law school in 2008. Good friend of mine. Here we are now, 12 years later. And he's at the forefront of this battle for privacy of our data and protection of our data. We put out so much of our data out there and we don't really know what's happening with it. So I thought here is someone, the authority on this subject, could come and educate us a bit, could school us a bit. Welcome, Kazim. Welcome to the circus.
Hey. Thanks a lot, Karan, and thanks, Jhala, for having me here. And look forward to this discussion. Once again, we've been talking about these things a lot, but I really look forward to finally we are in a recording session. So I'm looking forward to this, man. And thank you for having me here. And exciting time.
And Shanks making his debut on the podcast.
Woohoo!
Excited?
A bit nervous, man, more than excited. I think you've been doing a fantastic job so far, but yeah, let's see if I can add something to this. I'm excited to have this conversation, to be honest, because it's been at the top of my mind for a long time, and no better. I think three of us make a good, sensible setup discussing this. Hopefully, we can have some good insight and can answer some of our deep questions that we've been sitting with for a while. So, Kazim, tell us something about the dialogue. So, this is a think tank you founded and run, and I see it everywhere. You're in every newspaper almost every day. So give us a little bit about the dialogue. What is it?
Thanks a lot. Thanks. I mean, you're really flattering me with that. I don't know why, but it's great to know. I'm really grateful that I have such friends who really think so highly of me. And I think the same for you, man. You're doing great in life, and I'm sure that this podcast is gonna be killing it as it comes out. Going back to the dialogue, yes, we are a think tank. We work on tech policy largely. We look at intersection of society, technology, and public policy and how they marry and interact with each other. We are working in the privacy space, protecting your digital rights, and also coming up with a lot of research, driving the discourse on technology policy, driving the narrative, publishing articles, papers, informing people about it, and the need for more progressive laws to protect our data and protect our privacy as per the Supreme Court judgment of right to privacy. And there are many sectors we work in. We work in e-commerce, we look at AI, we look at free flow of data, non-personal data, personal data. There's a lot of technicalities involved with what we do. But we also work with government, we parliamentarians, we work with various communities in the society ecosystem. We work with think tanks, we work with consultants, we work with lawyers and also media like you to sort of push the message out, talk about it so that we have a more robust set of laws which can protect us and which can also take this country forward. And hopefully in the future, we will do that.
So it's safe to say you guys promote discussion and discourse around policy, tech policy specifically, and, involve those various stakeholders, which is businesses, the government, and the citizen, which is so key, right? I mean, for us to be involved, just as an average citizen, to be involved in the discourse that goes into policy making is something we've always wanted to do, but it's so hard to actually find a platform for that. Not all of us are writing newspaper articles and blogs, but we do have a point of view, and it's really good to connect with you to kind of get that into an official platform where I know this will then go into actually forming policy.
Absolutely. And that's what happens, that definitely happens a lot. We do have a government which works in different ways, and they do sort of input a lot of the stuff we are doing and also other think tanks are doing. So definitely there is a lot of scope. There's a lot of room for potential expansion, aggressive expansion, if I may put it that way. And definitely, I think we can push those messages out. And for people to actually feel that they are important, I think it's very important to build that trust. And people's voices have to go to the government, and we are like an intermediary. We sort of connect with you. We talk to people. We do surveys. We do research. We talk to a lot of them. We're coming up with a paper on how university students their rights have to be protected. We did something on Aarogya Setu. We sort of consulted a lot of people. So we drive these consultations, and they happen every month. So that's how we do it.
So yeah, Aarogya Setu is obviously a very fascinating place for us to start, because that's the app now that everyone is sort of needs to get on board with, because obviously the more people that get it, the better chance of it working, because it's a contact tracing app. But there is a fear and there's a distrust maybe of government about what are we really giving up? Are we giving up too much data? Are we giving up too much information in order for us to give that? How do we bridge that gap?
So there are three things, Jhala. There's one is we are living in an unprecedented time. We're living in a very different time where this is an emergency. Okay, there's an health emergency, and we need to catch this virus, get hold of it, and nip it in the bin, right? So it's important. Back in the day when you used to have pandemics every 18th century, 19th century, and 20th century, you didn't have technology. So how you would trace people is to just understand, okay, you met this person, you met X, Y, Z, trace their contacts. You do that manually. You don't have to do that manually. You do it technologically. So that's much faster, much more efficient. So yes, you need contact tracing apps. However, those contact tracing apps have to come with certain guidelines and procedures they work under. How you combat a virus like this is you trace, test, and isolate. The first step towards anything is tracing. Once you trace them, you isolate them. And the government has been successful in tracing a lot of these people through the app. So our app is effective, and we need the app. In fact, we in our report said you need the app. But you don't need the app without any privacy framework, and you need an ordinance which legalizes the effect of the app. Number two, it's very important to have purpose limitation. The app should not be used for any other purpose, but for tracing people for this pandemic, right? To give an analogy of it, the Dark Knight, I'm sure you guys must have seen it, that in the last scene, I think the Batman is sort of looking at this big system where he's talking about building the system to catch the Joker, and he is monitoring everybody in Gotham. Some millions of people are being traced and monitored, and you're sort of looking at who is doing what through the sonar technology. So he says that, look, you're the one who is controlling this, and you will delete it by tapping your name once I catch the Joker. And that's what happened. I mean, the system is destroyed. Similarly, the app should not function after this pandemic is over. And ideally, it should not be used for any other purpose like e-commerce, selling of products or stuff like that. So the data which is collected, person data, should be deleted. Anonymized data for research can be used to sort of map future vaccines, but definitely not more than that. Legal.
Kazim, does that make you a real life Mr. Fox?
I don't know if I am Lucius Fox or not. I'm not that old, definitely. I'm much younger than how Fox, definitely much younger than Fox. And I don't think I would want to be in the shoes of Fox because there's a lot of responsibility.
From a noble point of view, that you have good intentions.
Philosophical point of view, are you the one here safeguarding all that power being given to one man? And it's not Batman in this case, it's Mr. Modi ji.
I think that's always going to be the case. And even within the government, including the Prime Minister and others, recognize that you can't have absolute power to one man. So definitely we are one of the people who will be involved with that. But more importantly, I think it's important for Indians and people who are listening to this podcast, the millennials and people who are in our age group, to actually recognize that from a human being, you should not become a data being, that you should not just be a data point for any fiduciary or anybody to just process your information because it's important, and then they can sort of sell you products or whatever they want to, or they want to give you their scheme information. So yes, there has to be a pushback. How is my data being used? Why are you using my data? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to delete it? Can you delete it? I need to know these questions, right? I need to know the answers to these questions. I'm not saying don't use it. I am on all the platforms, and so are you. We are on the internet. So we are not definitely saying don't use it, but use it by informing us, tell us, take our consent, don't misuse it. Don't sell it without our knowledge. Don't abuse the information. It's the same thing which goes, I think, in friends circle, in communities, in relationships. You don't just behave in a fashion which is not acceptable. You don't tell information to others without consulting. Okay, can I tell this to this person? I got to know about this person. There could be a lot of health records. I mean, a lot of people are battling with mental health issues. You're not going to go tell your friends, oh, this guy is going to a therapist.
In terms of our health records, so these days what happens is now if you get termed as a containment zone, if you've had a case within your building or your society or whatever it is, you've got municipal officials who come in, firstly seal the place. Sure, you're in a containment zone. But then they put up a sticker in some cases with the name of the person who's got it and when he's got it. And this is public information stuck outside a door.
That's a problem.
How legal is that, firstly?
Yeah, that's not legal. That's illegal. You need to contain that place. It's important that people know that there's a particular house nearby which has a positive patient.
Right.
But who is that patient? What is her age? What does she do? All that information might not be necessary for others to be isolated. So if, let's say, if there's a flat nearby your house which gets infected, definitely you need to know that there's an infection there. But you don't have to know who and how and why, because again, purpose limitation. Is it enough information to know that there's an infection in the house for me to isolate myself? I think that's more than enough. You don't need to know who got infected, because whoever is there is inside, not going to come out. So you're not going to be threatened anyway.
Exactly. I found that quite appalling, in fact.
And we've seen databases.
Were you the one named and shamed?
I wasn't named and shamed. No, fortunately, I haven't. I don't know. Maybe I've got the corona. Who knows? I haven't been tested. I've been wearing a mask.
I just got an antibody test today. So very soon I'll find out if I had the virus or not. So one sec. So if I did, do I immediately have to go on the app and inform everyone that I've had it before?
Yeah. You need to inform the government. And no, that's fair. The app doesn't tell me if Jhala has positive. It tells me how many people in the radius I live have, which is great, which is good information to know, because step out of the house. You need to know, okay, somebody living in 5 meters of where I am has been tested positive. The problem which happens is personal information going out, right? So for future, look, we as Indians tend to be a little too vengeful and spiteful as people also. So we have a lot of frustration as people, right? That's how we've come out of independence, and we still have a lot of anger. And you can see that anger. Now, you don't want to let people know that, okay, 15 people, and who are there, they were positive. In the future, they might be discriminated against. You never know. They might be sort of said, okay, we can't give you these access to these services. And seen that with AIDS. You've seen that with AIDS.
No, I myself am a culprit, because I just said it. Were you named and shamed? So I already said it in such a way as if it's a shameful thing to have the disease.
Exactly. And we've seen with AIDS in the 90s how people were discriminated, and you wouldn't even go near an AIDS patient.
Leprosy as well, right?
Leprosy, exactly. It's like you're treating people like untouchables. And untouchability, discrimination, it's in our blood, right? I mean, that's how that's how the psyche of who we are, and we're fighting against it. I hope this generation, people like us, people like you, we fight against it and we sort of get rid of that.
Data privacy becomes such a big deal out here in terms of society, how they react, how we ostracize people they've got a virus which isn't their fault.
Yeah.
And yet they're shunned away, and which is why privacy becomes such a big deal, right? I think it's a massively relevant discussion.
I get that. And I get where you guys are coming from. And I understand the need for having your private information private to yourself. I get that. But for me, I have this still kind of notion in my head that if it's for the greater good, and for me, the greater good is saving lives, for example. If there's a way to save lives, then surely giving up a part of your silly information of websites that you've gone to, or stupid pictures that you've shared, or random conversations you've had with friends, is okay to give up on some of those privileges or issues of having those things private, if you can save a few lives. But I don't know if the trade-off is that simple, if it's too simplistic.
No, there are many layers. There are many layers to this, Jhala, and I think nobody is stopping the government from taking access to information. Privacy doesn't mean that you can't access information if there is a legitimate need, right? The point is, do you need a system or a legal framework which allows you to do surveillance at will, without any reason, without any problem, without any warrant?
Blanket
I mean, you can't enter my
surveillance.
house blanket. Like you can't enter my house without a search and warrant. You can't arrest me without a magistrate's order. Karan is a lawyer. We've done law in the past. How many marks we got, we did manage to pass. But the point is that
Karan is a lawyer, might be one of the most overstated facts in this podcast history.
Very shaky ground there.
But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Point being,
yeah,
that you don't need all that information. You can still be narrow in your search, because if you're smart, you will not do surveillance on everybody, right? You will only do surveillance on probable causes of people you think might be linked. And you will have those linkages because we have intelligence services. They're great people, really smart minds, super minds. They do their job and they do the job well. But they don't need another legal framework to just give them a blanket unfettered access to information at will without even having judicial scrutiny, because the right to privacy judgment in the Supreme Court says that there are three conditions to be met if you're accessing data. Number one, it has to be proportionate. So will you take my bank account password if you're trying to solve a very petty crime? Number two, it has to be necessary. Do you need my information? Can you do without it? Number three, it has to be legal. It has to be through a judicial order, or it has to be through a law. We don't have either right now. And the law itself, the bill itself, it's not a law, it's a bill, talks about no judicial order. So there are no checks and balances. How do you know that the government is not going to misuse the information, or any agency will not misuse it for any purpose? So the cost outweighs the advantage in such a huge fashion. And if you do a trade-off, you will realize that if you're smart, you will narrow your search. You will only do due diligence with people you know, and you don't have capacity. Indian government police doesn't have enough capacity to survey all the people in the world anyway.
It comes down to trust, right?
Yeah. How does it work also in terms of, are you flagging certain activities that people are doing, and then therefore that will make them suspicious? Because
you're flagging certain people, you're flagging certain behaviors, you're flagging certain mannerisms, and you're flagging certain communities or people who you feel might be relevant or might be important for that particular crime which happened, right? But you're not going to flag every innocent person. You can't. It's capacity-wise, it's impossible. Number two, you will end up fighting only one case in your life as a police officer if you start looking everywhere. You got to narrow your search to, I mean, we write papers, you guys do all the search for this episode. You will not looking at the universe plethora of information because there's so much information. Just because we have information doesn't mean that we'll arrive at the right knowledge. Knowledge and information are two different things. The knowledge of crime is not equal to the amount of information which you have. In fact, many times the knowledge of crime comes from a very narrow, and if you want my data, you can have it. Just get an order. I mean, it's as simple as that. Nobody's stopping you. Just put checks and balances. Just put enough mechanisms, checks and balances, and you can get data of all the 1.3 billion people. If you need to, you can. Government can.
Now, I guess my fear was having you have WhatsApp groups, right? And they're supposed to be end-to-end encrypted. And my thinking is, if I know that, and if I know I'm protected by that, by those laws of the encryption, I can use a WhatsApp group to recruit for my terrorist organization without any fear of consequence.
You can recruit even without the WhatsApp groups. You can do that on a text message. So it's not about whether it's a messaging app. Yeah. End-to-end encryption, in fact, helps me protect my privacy much more than any other application would, because that would give me a free space or a safe space to operate without knowing that, okay, the state might be after you or whatever, somebody could catch you or misinterpret you or abuse your information. As far as actors are concerned, there is something called a metadata. I mean, if you're looking at end-to-end encryption per se, a timestamp, IP addresses, there are phone numbers, a lot of information which police have accessed in the past and solved crimes, be it riots, be it criminal activities or terror activities. They've done that without needing to break encryption. So if you break encryption, again, what you do is the technology is there anyway. You break into encryption, but the terrorists will make their own encrypted software. And then what that leads to is a Pandora's box. So you're opening a lot, and people can hack into your system. So imagine if I'm a right person and terrorists hack into my account because there is no end-to-end encryption, then that puts me in a vulnerable state. And it also puts the law investigation officers in a vulnerable state because you don't want people to sort of get scot-free. So for good security, you need encryption.
Kazim, so I think like coming back to this whole the COVID contact tracing app, Aarogya Setu, the framework that the dialogue has written, this proposed framework for it. Something I want to just know as a layman is now they have all this data. So I came from Bombay to Bangalore. I flew, downloaded the app. So I had it on my phone. I feel a bit uncomfortable having this app on my phone. So after my quarantine period was over, deleted it. What is happening to all this data? Who has got it firstly? Where is it being stored? And who is looking out for my rights and the rights of this data? Essentially, who's the regulatory body here?
So what's happening with it? Well, it's being used to sort of course, trace your location. And if you are infected or if you come across somebody, you will be informed. Number two, who's handling it? Ministry of IT is the nodal body, and NIC has their service. So National I'm forgetting the name of NIC. Informatics, I think it's got to do NIC and whatever. NIC is the body. And number three, no, there is no regulatory body. That's where the gap is. There is no checks and balances, and there is no law or an ordinance or a legal footing to give teeth to this application and to say, okay, fine, this is a legitimate purpose. There is nothing like that. We don't have a data protection law anywhere, so this doesn't work under although the government believes and says that they're working within the 2019 bill, which is great. They've done a lot of remarkable things from where they were to where they are now. A lot of civil society organizations, including us, have been driving that narrative, working with them. But at the same time, we need a lot more if we are to really have a strong protection framework, because at this time, with the technology and the way things are going, we don't have that. I mean, we could end up like a China model. We are not a China model, but the last thing we want to do is to create easy surveillance and then, start rating people on basis of their social media behavior, then give them social ratings and, curb dissent. And I mean, look at the coronavirus spread. It wouldn't have spread if Chinese government wouldn't have taken action against the people who were talking about the virus back in November. And those, I think a couple of them were killed. So privacy has real ramifications. Look at what the world is going through. If China had privacy, this wouldn't have happened.
I know it's obviously we're not anywhere close to being in the situation that China is, but what would that mean if we did continue in this kind of path that we're going? What would it mean to live in a state like China and that kind of surveillance?
I think what differentiates a human being from an inanimate object is the ability to speak up for what we believe. That's why the purpose of the mind comes in. Otherwise, you rather be a subject. And China doesn't have citizens, it has subjects. They're not at the same level as us as human beings. They can't speak up for the government. And I've spoken to a few of them. They are like completely mum about what the government does. You don't want to be in that situation. That's a mental lockdown. We're already going through a physical lockdown. Chinese subjects have been living in a mental lockdown for years and years now. And they continue to do that. In return, what they get is a decent life and food and a house. And we don't even know how many people's houses have been destroyed to construct the new buildings. So there's a lot of discrimination which happens in China. India is nowhere near that because we have a constitutional democracy and we still have a functioning democracy even today. Although, yes, there are a lot of people who are dissenting who are looked different ways, but I think we do have a right to dissent in India. Definitely look at us. A lot of organizations dissent and the government does acknowledge a lot of these things. Of course, I mean, nobody is perfect. But China is a complete totalitarian state where your behavior on online, internet, social media is completely monitored. If you say something, police will come to you. If you say anything against Xi Jinping, you might get blocked or monitored further. That could lead to you being fired from your job because state is monitoring everything. It also means that you will get ratings and credits. Okay, so tomorrow, if you're a great believer of Xi Jinping, you might get better access to healthcare, better access to insurance, better access to cheaper loans. And you might be able to fly to a few countries because, yeah, he is a good guy. He appreciates the dictator of China. But the ex-guy, he said a lot of bad things on the internet. So we won't give him a flight ticket this year. We won't give him let him go. Those things, those segmentation process is already building up. So we definitely know we are close to that.
That is basically a Black Mirror life. That is essentially where we're in this. We're being rated socially. Your access to basic social welfare tools is being determined based on your conformism with the government. And That is absolutely scary, the stories that come out of China.
That's terrifying. And I have to admit, I've had this very blasé, dismissive attitude where, like I said, yeah, I mean, who cares if somebody can see a little bit of my information as long as it's for the greater good? But when you put it in that kind of perspective, I think it really hits home as to when the wrong, I won't say wrong people, but when you know that it's all being controlled by one entity or one government or one state, how badly it can be misused to make you guide your and absolute control. And I think
absolute control is dangerous. I mean, we have systems in India. We have a judiciary, we have a parliament, we have a media, we have a civil society. So the government cannot just get away with anything at any point of time. And people who do think that there is no voice, I mean, we have a lot of voice. It's just that we have to keep fighting for it, which is fine. I mean, we'll fight for that. The point being that the systems in China are completely governed by the single party rule which they have. There is not even any election process. And one guy is running the state and he is now going to be the future forever premier until he dies. So imagine how much control he can exercise. I mean, he can pretty much hack into any Chinese citizens and then sort of look into what they're doing. And if they're not complying, you don't even know. You get sort of kidnapped and they've kept you somewhere. Nobody knows. No human life. It's a completely shambolic place to be in.
But that brings us to Shanks and Donald Trump's favorite subject, which is China. And they love, like, obviously, everything China is in the news now. And now we are banning their apps. And I think that the whole reasoning for banning Chinese apps is because we're saying that we don't want them to have access to our data. Is that the whole story? Is that actually what the whole thing is about?
It's more than that, actually. It's a strategic compulsion, which the government had to take a step because they were trying to be too clever on the border at Ladakh. And I think the government had to pay them back with some or the other manner. So it's not just the apps. They have also restricted imports from China. They're also restricting future investments from China. They'll be having more checks and balances and sort of looking into those things as well. I am not in favor of any app ban because that just opens a can of worms that tomorrow you can ban anything at any point of time. There should be a process towards banning it. See, again, the difference is how it's done. If you have a data protection law, you go through a process and you say, doesn't meet the criteria, deregulate it, ban it, whatever. Makes sense. But just to sort of pass an order one random day because, yes, emotionally we are all quite angry and we should be, but there should have been a better way of doing this ban or even they wanted to hit back to the Chinese state, which is great. I mean, I would participate in that, but not in this fashion. There should have been a more clever thought of process, but I think also because they had to react, it was a knee-jerk reaction. However, when it comes to Chinese hardware, I do believe that Huawei 5G is the future. 5G is the future of connectivity. That's where Huawei has to. Not too much in the data space, because apps don't have that much of a national security concern as much as hardware could have. So yeah, just ban Huawei. I think that has to be done.
Exactly. Huawei is something I want to get into a little bit. People have underestimated the power of, people think it's TikTok and all the other ByteDance apps. But if they control the very flow of data, who cares about apps? Everything is going through them. And I mean, it's insane that we and countries around the world are actually allowing this surveillance state called China to enter and set up their entire telecommunications networks, their 5G networks, using Chinese hardware, Huawei in particular. And somehow we're unable to see their influence and the ramifications of things like this. I just don't get it.
Exactly. And that's where I think the big strategic game is for the future. And technology is suddenly finding itself in a big sort of strategic warfare. And countries like the US and China, you are beating against each other. India is, of course, aligned with the US on this logically also. It makes sense for them to do that. But yeah, I think Huawei has to be curbed. And there are legitimate reasons. I'll tell you 2 laws passed by the Chinese state in 16 and 17 where they have complete access to the Huawei data and whatever Huawei is sort of accessing. Number 2, I think the Chinese Communist Party's member, one of the senior guys, sits on the board of Huawei also. And the company is completely managed by the party and the dictatorship over there, and they monitor what they're doing, and they're all very looped into each other. They have excellent coordination in China when it comes to
surprise.
They know. Yeah, and look at China, what they're doing. They're doing these OBOR, One Belt, One Road initiatives. They are basically buying off state institutions. In Kenya, in Sri Lanka, you've seen they'll give you a big loan. They will take $150 billion, pay me at ease. You can't pay that money at all. What they'll do is they'll take your telecom infrastructure. They'll take your communication infrastructure. So they're pretty much, this is the new colonization, which we have to be wary of. The China model of colonization, which is strategic interest in other countries and strategic infrastructure, both soft infrastructure and hard infrastructure, and then taking over slowly. And then you reach a point where you can't do anything. So you have to give up. And these loans, especially in the Corona times, you're looking at when everybody needs money and the countries are going through contraction. India is going through 5% contraction. China is going through 1% growth still. And a lot of the loans they gave to countries, they've sort of said, okay, just keep the money. We don't need it. But they're going to come back and they're going to ask for state infrastructure.
I mean, just from my point of view, I can understand when the smaller countries don't really have a choice. They need that money. They need to take the loans. But surely a country like India will understand and see through this and be able to resist, right?
That's what we are doing. That's why the curb on the investments. That's why the checks and balances in the imports, which China is thinking. But I would say this is a knee-jerk reaction. This should have been thought through and well coordinated over a 10-year period where you also need to replace, because Chinese companies are giving a lot of jobs. Now, what happens to those sectors, to those people? And I know a few people personally who are losing jobs because of this. So you need to develop an Indian alternative, an Indian startup ecosystem, which you haven't done because the startup program didn't function well. We don't have enough support for startups in India. We haven't given them good access to money. Most of our VCs are foreigners, right? American, Chinese, or Japanese. You have SoftBank and others. You need to create that infrastructure, the VC infrastructure, which allows money to come into these startups, and they can be alternatives.
Welcome back to the show, guys. We were just discussing, Shanks was saying that we need to dub the Dark Knight into Tamil to get
we need reach.
We need reach. Yeah. I think Dark Knight has to be seen by everybody. I think it's important.
I agree. Man, the thing is, the Dark Knight was always such a forward-thinking movie. The villain, the concepts, mentally, it just broke me, taught me, it gave me a whole new perspective. And now that I just keep falling back onto it. Even with things like data security, ahead of its time, man. Christopher Nolan gets one big eye.
Talking about movies ahead of the time, and this is another point related to what we're talking about, and we were talking about privacy and spying and all of that. I was always of the belief of living a very Minority Report kind of life where you don't have murders predicted, but instead of that, you have a chip inserted in every single human being where you know where they're being tracked at all given times in their life. So literally, there's no scope for murder or rape or any sort of criminal activities.
China is going to do that. China is going to do that very soon. They're getting there.
What's the downside? I'm still trying to understand.
China.
I'm still trying to figure out what is the downside of that, of them inserting a chip into a tracking chip.
I think there's only a downside because you're in a mental lockdown. Because now, if tomorrow I don't want you to say anything against a particular ideology or a position of whoever is in power, then you start limiting that. And imagine if you can't even think against Xi Jinping. I mean, that would be extremely discouraging. Anybody, I mean, it's not just Xi Jinping, any ruler or any critique. I mean, you're not a human being then. You're definitely not. You're a data being, and you're sort of living 50% of your life, what you could do. So yeah, it is horrible if that happens.
I think Jhala's dream is to just become the Oracle from Minority Report in one pool. It's like floating around.
Not oracles, they're called precogs, I think.
Precogs.
They have these nightmares of people's crimes. But okay, I mean, like I said, at the end of the earlier part, where we are talking about a lot of terrifying consequences of surveillance and this sort of Orwellian world that we could be getting ourselves into. And I know we're far away from being China, and there are a lot of positives that we can take, like you said, of the government, of the state, of people like yourself in think tanks, etc., who are looking at the good intentions of it and trying to figure out ways to frame the legal world and try to make it to safeguard our interests and our privacy. So things aren't all going towards a very dark space, right? There are ways to fix this.
No, there is enough resistance. There is enough resistance. I think there are enough people, organization. You guys are part of that resistance. We are fighting. And so even within the government, in parliament, in media, in judiciary, I think we got to be a little more optimistic and a little more smart. Things just don't fall like that, right? Of course, there's a lot which could be done, which should be done. You can't fight a battle if you go with a losing mindset, right? You got to believe that you can win it. And many times, just look at Aarogya Setu. We didn't believe the government would actually take the recommendations, but the pressure was so fast and so much that they had to do it. So I think similarly, just keep at it, because that's our duty as good citizens, right? And people who understand the law need to go out and talk about it. What you don't want is a stale community of people. People need to start questioning and talking about it. We are not saying go and sort of just go after the government, but talk, question. And through these podcasts, through these initiatives like you guys are doing, many other initiatives that others are doing, I think it's important that we raise the awareness, because everything is now on post-COVID world on the internet. You're gonna date people on the internet. You're gonna marry people on the internet. You're gonna order food on the internet. Everything is happening on the internet, apart from a few things. Everything else is happening on the internet. So people need to talk about it, question it, and ask a progressive question, a smart question, and just be out there, really being part of that community, as part of the media. We are collaborating with you. You be part of our discussions and you voice your opinion through us, through others. I think that's where the movement has to go forward.
Kazim, what according to you are those laws, at least if you could summarize it, if you say the dialogue as a think tank, over the next 2 years, and you personally as well, 2 years, 5 years, and maybe 10 years, if we look at them as good milestones, what do we need to have in the 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? What kind of state do we want to be living in? What are those milestones in terms of data privacy and protection?
I think there are 4 key things which I would look at. One, definitely checks and balances for any agency which is processing data. Government or private, any agency, there has to be checks and balances. There has to be a parliamentary oversight and a judicial safeguard built into the law. We don't have that yet, number one. Number two, we need free flow of data. We don't want India to become a data island. The current bill talks about localizing everything within the jurisdiction of India. So you're limiting yourself from the other countries and processing those data sets and sending your data set abroad and receiving something back. And through that exchange of information and ideas, you can create better technology like AI and etc. The present laws don't allow put a limit to that. So we need to allow free flow of data, similar to the free flow of people and the free flow of ideas. Data is the next thing which has to be flowing across jurisdictions so that we can get the best of the world and we can participate in that best so that we can replicate that in our country. Number 3, we definitely don't need non-personal data in a person data bill. We need non-personal data separate and we need the person data bill separate. That's something that has to be sort of demarcated clearly. And we also need anonymity on social media. The current bill talks about verification process. So what about whistleblowers, anonymized people who just are anonymous talking about issues? Their voices could be curbed if you are able to verify everybody with where they are and everything. So I think anonymity should be given on the internet to people, safeguarding freedom of speech on the internet. So the rights of people on the internet have to be protected. If you want to sort of talk about issues, you should be allowed to talk about issues, right? So government is talking about proactive takedown of content. That should not happen because the government can't decide what is a good opinion or bad opinion. I think that's up to the people to take a call, and we need platforms to operate as intermediaries, and let that be the case. We don't want platforms to start arbitrating and adjudicating what is good content or bad content. I think that should be left to the people. So these are some of the philosophical issues I have with the current regime and the current data protection or privacy or intermediate laws which we have. Of course, no backdoor access to data, no breaking of encryption, allowing safe harbor to continue, allowing user-generated content to prosper. No content regulation, limited regulation. Maybe you're looking at these new series on Netflix and Amazon Prime, and the government might say, "Oh, this doesn't fall well with the culture. This doesn't go well with our beliefs. So let's start censoring stuff." No censorship. I think that's a problem. Definitely no censorship of the art form, of audios, videos, even the show you guys are doing, right? So this kind of stuff has to be stopped. I mean, if these laws are protectionist in nature and censoring content, that should not go ahead. So some of these issues, I think, have to be addressed from that angle.
I mean, interesting that you actually said to protect the anonymity of people on social media. For me, I had a completely different viewpoint where I'm saying so many people are hiding behind a fake name to spew hatred, death threats, rape threats. Like, I just know so many people who are hiding behind the invisible keyboard. So you're saying that is something that should continue to be protected, those rights of those filthy, vile human beings. You know what I mean?
They should be caught and they should be reprimanded. And I think that's what I'm saying. You do not need verification process to catch trolls. You can still do that. Police has all the access. Police, I know for a fact that if there was a post done by somebody, police can go after them and nab them. They have that much ability, and they have enough data, metadata, and information to go and nab them. The problem with not allowing anonymity is, what if I go against your opinion? And what if I have that influence and I can't raise my voice against certain issues? That protection has to be given. And a lot of anonymous people, a lot of whistleblowers are anonymous in nature. You've got to protect their rights. And you've seen in India, we don't have a good track record of safeguarding whistleblowers. You've seen that in the last few decades. Whatever government might have been in power doesn't matter. So we need to protect them. We're not protecting trolls. Trolls, I mean, if the government really wants to go after them, they can easily go after them.
The government sometimes seems like a troll.
Yeah. So point was that you got to protect the anonymity of people. At the same time, you don't need to create laws that gives you unfettered powers. The powers which the government has right now is enough for them to catch the culprits or the terrorists or the sort of anti-state actors. If you're going to give more leeway towards allowing unfettered access, it can be misused more than used. So that's the sort of the cost outweighs the benefit by huge margin. And I think we need to protect ourselves from that, because you don't want to create an agency where it's just go after anybody's data point, push them behind bars, pressure them to say something and then release them. So that you don't want to create a fear state or fear psychosis that, oh, don't say anything online because what if the government or what if anybody in power? And it's not just any government. I mean, it's not just one party, any party. No party would want or would sort of say, oh yeah, let's do it or like that. I mean, any government in state would look at, okay, fine, can I do this? Can I do that? But at the same time, in the opposition, they would say something else. So we need to be able to leverage the power of this constitutional democracy and get some progressive laws and some pushback. And they would know, and the government would appreciate that. And they would know, yeah, this is something we should do. We've seen so many times pushback has happened and they've changed or it sort of reverted back to old versions or new versions or changed their versions. So it's a possibility. Even with the new bill, we've seen some changes, but some of the changes are not so good also. So I think that fight has to continue. And that's why we are a democracy. We're not a China, because if we were China, then we would be living under this massive fear psychosis. We can't do this episode in China, guys. We cannot do this episode.
Of course not.
I mean, we can't even record this in China. We could be under that level of surveillance. We alone publish.
They're watching us through the camera right now as we're doing this.
Possibly, yeah, possibly. Which is why if you have a Chinese device, check again.
But no, I just want to say, because I know you may need to tread a little carefully because of your dealings with various states and with the governments and all of that stuff. But you did mention that you felt that the government does appreciate what the right things are to get to in terms of surveillance. Do you actually feel that that's the case with this government or with your dealings with them, that they want to do the right thing?
Look, they want to do the right thing, but they may not be informed about the right thing. I think that many times what happens is they are not well informed. Okay, what a strong privacy law could lead to better security. A strong surveillance law could lead to better surveillance, more targeted surveillance. If you got to be efficient, and we all, Karan has had a business, so have you. You got to be efficient with your resources and your money and your time. Government can't do that if they're going to mass scale surveillance. So they will be smart enough to know that is not something which will be feasible. They are receptive to feedback. I think all governments have been. but at the same time, the draft which we are seeing are a problem. So this is like a back and forth thing, which keep having. It's like you play a tennis match with the government. You give them a serve, and then they hit you back with something, and then you hit back. At least we are playing a tennis match. In China, it's like golf. You just hit it out the park. That's it. So at least we are not playing golf. Tennis is better than golf. Even as a sport, I would say it's a far better sport. So yeah. There are problems. I'm not saying there aren't. It's not like completely beautiful picture in India. There are problems, but we can live with these problems. China, you either live or die of problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important for us to resist, right? Living in a democracy, living in India, I think the only way the government understands sometimes that they cannot go and infringe on my fundamental rights is when I resist, when we all resist collectively or individually, and we're able to also better articulate ourselves. Speaking to you today, speaking to you generally, getting a sense, your point of view, educating myself on the subject allows me to then go and resist and articulate myself while I do that. And sort of, the idea is not to resist the government. I want to work with the government to make this a better place to live in for them, for us,
exactly.
for everyone else. So the idea is not to resist, but to just educate and kind of know what's happening.
You're not going to get anywhere by resisting. We don't live in those times where you can just go after protesting and be an activist with full-blooded, you wear clothes and then just go after them. You got to be clever and smart and work with them, because they are the ones who have the stamping authority on what will happen. And if you resist them and they get emotional about it and then they resist you, you can't have an engagement. You break it.
It's unproductive, right?
It's unproductive. It's a lot of wastage of time and energy.
Kazim, I think on that note, what an enlightening discussion. I think you've changed a lot of my perspectives. Like I said, I've had a very naive outlook in life. And I think speaking to you and probably a lot of people who had that kind of similar outlook to me will change their perspective after this conversation. So I really appreciate.
Great to talk to you guys. I think it's been great. We've had recorded conversations and non-recorded ones. I think all the ones have been quite relaxing. I would say the recorded ones are far more relaxing and casual. And I think I really like the fact that you guys are keeping it chill and relaxed, which is what is very unlike tech policy, because we are very formal and very serious, and we go with, we have these tech policy faces, and I have that tone in my.
You have that attire as well, right? That jacket,
completely inside and outside. Yeah,
I wouldn't even be able to do that, because you'd see my eyes glaze over after a while when I'm not understanding all the really formal tech speak. And then I'm like, I don't know what we're really talking about. But Shanks, not bad. How do you feel on your debut?
No, great. This has been, it was awesome with Kazim, man. I think it's a great topic, and I think it's a very relevant topic, and that nervousness passed. And I think we have something here that could be of use to people like you and me, Jhala, where
sure.
we can educate ourselves. And the Dialogue has a website. I think everyone should just hop on there, read what they're writing about, follow them, get in touch with Kazim, stalk him on social media. He doesn't care about data privacy.
And stay aware of all the privacy protection acts and laws and everything that's sort of an ongoing, changing process. And just make sure that you're keeping abreast of really what you are giving up as a human.
Yeah, just question. Just ask questions.
Exactly.
Just read up stuff. Hear this podcast as well.
Yeah, and if anybody thinks that Shanks should take over as the permanent host of this podcast, then feel free to unsubscribe.
I think too rough, man. I'm going to leave it to you. It's drained me a certain extent. I prefer being behind in your ear, essentially.
All right, cheers, boys. We shall catch up soon. Great conversation, and we might have a follow-up episode to see how things are progressing.
Thank you, Kazim.
Yeah, great time spent with you all. That was a good discussion. Yeah, look forward to
many more.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
All right, see you guys soon.